Okay. All right. Let's learn. Let's learn, guys. So I think there's something. I just want to talk about something very very simple, very very simple, and hopefully it'll be something we could take to heart. It's something that's very very necessary, especially this time of year. You know, there's a mice that come. This time of year, obviously, it doesn't matter what level you're on. Some people more, some people less. But there's no question that every single one of us has some fear coming into Yom Kippur. You know, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, this time of year. There's nothing that we take that can be taken for granted. Nothing. The fact that we're alive this year, I mean, God forbid, everything is literally hanging in the balance. There's nothing to be taken for granted. The person has, had life and intelligence and health and everything this past year. It's all up for grabs. Everything is up for grabs. So, there's a story I remember, they say from the Barditchever, Lev Yitzchak Barditchev, that one time during this time of year, he overheard a very simple Jew sitting down during this time, and he had like a few pieces of paper in front of him, and a schnapps glass, And he was sitting down, and he realized that this person was talking to Hashem, and he was saying, listen, Hashem, I have a list of grievances that I have against you. That this past year, my cow died, and, this person got sick, and all that. A list of problems that I have against you. And these are a list of problems that you have against me. I spoke Lashon Hara, I didn't keep Shabbos properly, I didn't daven them in, whatever it might be. So, God, let's just make a deal. I'll forgive you on the stuff that you did against me, and you'll forgive me for the stuff that I did against you. So he said, Hashem, you're maskim, Mistam, you're maskim, L'chaim, fine. So the Barditchever looked at that and he saw, he smiled because, there's something sweet about that innocence. But the truth is we're more sophisticated than that, and we understand that nothing, Hashem doesn't push anything aside. Nothing is forgotten. So the most obvious answer of what we have to do is do tshuva, right? It's just to wipe away our affairs. But sometimes it's very hard. It's very hard for people like us to really, truly dig down deep and do proper tshuva. So what we really want from Hashem is for Hashem to look at us like we look at ourselves. When we look at ourselves, we remember all the bad stuff we've done. We know our baggage. But what happens when a person judges himself? You judge yourself, with a good eye. You say, listen, I know I have all that bad stuff, but, generally speaking, I'm a good guy. Generally speaking, I'm okay. Generally speaking, I'm a tzaddik. I have good aspirations. We judge ourselves l'kav schus, right? We judge ourselves leaning towards compassionately. We want Hashem to judge us like we judge ourselves. So how do we do that? How do we get that? Because again, Hashem's not going to just forget stuff. He's just not going to push things aside. But we want Him to judge us favorably. We want Him to judge us again like we judge ourselves. So how do we get that to happen? So listen, this is very, very important pasuk in Malachim. The pasuk says, it's talking about a story of Elisha. Elisha was the main student of Eliyahu Navi. Elisha was a great, great Navi, great miracle worker in the times of Tanakh. The pasuk says that there was a certain village that he used to frequent upon. He used to stay very much in this place. And particularly in this village, there was a woman, she was called Isha Hashunamis. The woman Hashunamis. And she's described in this pasuk, her and her husband, as chashuv people, very chashuv people. So this Elisha Hanavi would stay by their house. So the pasuk says like this: after Elisha stayed by them for a number of times, he asked this woman, Hayesh l'daber, he wanted to do something nice. She's been doing such good things for him, keeping it, letting him stay at her house and everything. So he wanted to give her something back. So the pasuk says that Elisha offered her, Hayesh l'daber el hamelech oil sar tzava. I have very strong political connections. Do you want me to speak on your behalf to the king or to one of the generals? I could pull some strings for you. So Vatimer, and she responded, I sit amongst my people. I don't want to get involved. I don't want the king to know that I even exist. It's not worth it. So the Zohar says in this pasuk, the Zohar says that this is not just a simple question Elisha was offering to talk to the king. The Zohar says that this was taking place during Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And the king that Elisha was offering to talk to him on her behalf was Hashem himself. So Elisha Hanavi was offering this woman during Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur time to speak to Hashem on her behalf. And if Elisha offered us such a thing, I think every single one of us would definitely jump on it. There's no Elisha Hanavi is going to daven for us, going to speak to Hashem on our behalf. So what did she say? No. I sit amongst my people. What does that mean? I sit amongst my people. And so it's so more powerful to her to sit amongst her people and to have just quiet, as opposed to Elisha speaking to the king, speaking to Hashem for her. And the truth is, because of this idea of sitting amongst my people, there is a custom among those. There are some people that have a custom that during this time of year they don't get aliyahs. They don't want even the name to be mentioned in shul. I sit amongst my people. So what does that mean? So what the pasuk is saying to us is a very, very important message. Again, like I said, we want Hashem to judge us like we judge ourselves. How does that happen? So listen to the words of Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek was the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. Listen to this. Lubavitcher Rebbe, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek said the following. He said, you know how we get Hashem to judge us like we judge ourselves, to judge us favorably? The way to do it is to have achdus. That's the way. It's as simple as that. Why? Because he says like this. We say this in Kagavna every Friday night. The Zohar says this in many, many places. That the only way for Hashem to unite and to really become one with the Jewish people is if the Jewish people themselves are one. Hashem refuses to have His presence rest on those people that are fractured. Hashem does not let His presence reside on a broken vessel. Hashem only is willing and desires to become one with the people, with the Jewish people, only when the Jewish people themselves are one. So says the Lubavitcher Rebbe, if the Jewish people are ba'achdus, if one Jew cares very much about the other, if you go out of your way to care for your friend and to do good things and to think about him and to care for him, and you become one with your neighbor, then Hashem automatically is naturally, so to speak, drawn to you. If you become one with the Jewish people, then you no longer a fractured individual, you become one, part of that collective whole called the Jewish people, then Hashem unites with you. And once Hashem is united with you, then He judges you like He judges Himself, because He's a part of you. And just like when you look at yourself in a favorable way, with an ayin tov, with a good eye, that even though you see all the negative parts of your life, but nevertheless, collectively speaking, you look at yourself in a positive light. If Hashem becomes one with you, then He looks at you also as part of Him, also in a positive way. How does Hashem become one with you? Only if you become one with your neighbor. It's as simple as that. If achdus takes place, if we care one for the other, and we really take this, like what the Isha Hashanah said, "B'soich ami anoch yesheves." I sit amongst my people. I am one of the people. I care for everybody. I care for my neighbor. I don't want to stick out. I don't want to be an individual. All I want to be is to be a person that cares for my neighbor. If a person takes to heart and a person becomes one with the collective whole of the Jewish people, he doesn't want to be an individual anymore. The more a person becomes one with the entire Jewish people, the more Hashem is connected to him, and the more Hashem is connected to him, the more Hashem looks at you in a favorable way. That's what the Lubavitcher Rebbe said. And this is a teaching of the Gemara. We all know the famous Gemara. The Gemara says that a certain ger, convert, came to Hillel and Shammai, right? So there's a number of stories like this. That the convert he went to Shammai first, and he said to Shammai, "Shammai, teach me Torah on one foot. Teach me Torah on 1 foot." So basically, give me like a one-liner that basically sums up everything. So Shammai kicked him out. There's no such one-liner. There's 613 mitzvahs. That's it. There's no easy way. So after he went to Shammai, he went to Hillel, right? And we all know what Hillel said. What did Hillel say to him? What's the essential point of Kol HaTorah Kul that everything else is built off of? Ma'adesani loch lechaveroch lesavid. What you wouldn't like to be done to you, don't do to your friend. Everything else is an explanation of that. And now Zil Gemara, go and learn the rest, because the rest is just an offshoot of that. What does that mean? That the whole Torah is don't do to your friend what you wouldn't want to do to yourself? That's it? That's everything? So Tzemach Tzedek, yes, that is literally everything. Because the tachlis of all Torah, the tachlis of all mitzvahs is what? Is to have Hashem's presence brought down to the world. That's the tachlis of everything. The tachlis of the creation of the world, the tachlis of why we put on tefillin, the tachlis of why we keep Shabbos is what? To unite the Jewish people with Hashem. So Hillel said that the most basic point of how that takes place, how do you unite Hashem with the Jewish people? Is to be united amongst yourselves. What you wouldn't want to be done to you, don't do to your friend. If you look at yourself as just part of your neighbor, part of your friend, a person that just goes out of his way to do good things to other people, not as an individual, not as someone who's haughty and conceited, the more a person becomes selfless, the more you're fulfilling the whole tachlis of everything. You're uniting Hashem with the Jewish people. The rest of Torah is just a commentary of how that particularly takes place. But the basic idea of the framework of how it happens is through the Jewish people uniting. It's as simple as that. And throughout our history, we've had every single tzaddik, in order for them to become part of the tradition of Torah, to become part of our, the Jewish lore of who our great people were, they had to be people who were self-sacrificing for the Jewish people. Listen to what the Zohar says. We wouldn't be able to say this if it wasn't for the Zohar. There's a lot of things like that. Listen to this. It's in Parshas Noach. I'm reading, the Aramaic is very hard, but I'll read the Hebrew. The translation is like this. Tanya, we learned the following. Rabbi Yossi taught, when the world is guilty, before Hashem, and Hashem wants to bring punishment, God forbid, to the world, so tzaddik ahu shenimsa ba'olam, the Zohar says that the tzaddik that's found in that particular generation, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mesapri, Hashem talks it over with that tzaddik. Whether it's consciously down here during the times of prophets, or nowadays it's in his higher level of his neshama. But whenever a tragedy is going to take place, God forbid, Hashem speaks it over with the tzaddik. Why? Bishvil, why? Why is that? Bishvil sheyachin levakish rachmim ha'olam v'yispais, because Hashem is giving him a chance to daven for the generation. That's what Hashem is trying to do. Ma Isa HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what does Hashem do to get him, to get the tzaddik to daven? So Hashem discusses with him the negative parts of the world. Hashem discusses with him how the Rishayim are terrible, how the world is, how this generation is terrible, everybody's not keeping halacha. He's trying to awaken the tzaddik's compassion. So what does Hashem do to really get the tzaddik going, to daven? So he says that the whole world is terrible. He says to the tzaddik, everything is terrible, and I'm going to destroy everything except for you. You shouldn't be worried. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of your family. You're going to be fine. But everybody else is going down the drain. That's what he says. I'll take care of you, but everybody else is going down. So what's the way of a tzaddik when he hears that? When he hears that he is going to be saved, but everybody else is going to be destroyed. So he lets go of everything that Hashem is promising him. He doesn't care about it. And he throws himself in with everybody else. And he says, if you're going to destroy everybody, destroy me along with it. That's what the tzaddik does. So in order that Hashem should be appeased. Minayin, where do we see this example? Moshe Rabbeinu. So Hashem said to Moshe, we all know in Chumash, Chotu Yisrael, the Jewish people sinned, whether it be with the Egel, whether it be the Meraglim, whatever it might be, the Jewish people have sinned. So also Egel Masecha, the example given, the Jewish people made the Egel. So Harav Mimeni Vashvinis, what did Hashem say in Chumash to Moshe Rabbeinu? Step aside, I'll take care of you, I'm going to make you into a new nation, but the rest of them I'm going to destroy. So what does Moshe Rabbeinu do? So what Moshe Rabbeinu hears that? So immediately Moshe Rabbeinu says, "In b'shvil kavod sheli yikrisu Yisrael, if you want to destroy the Jewish people for my honor, chas v'shalom. Mutav she'amos v'lo yomru she'azavti Yisrael. It's better that I die than the future generations say that I didn't go to bat for them." So Moshe Rabbeinu said, "V'im'ayin mecheinam misifrecha. I don't want a part of this. If you're going to wipe out the Jewish people, wipe me out as well. I'm not interested. I'm not interested." Goes on more than that. Not only do we find, so what is this coming from? Because the tzaddik, to become a tzaddik, one does not have to just learn as much Torah as they can. It doesn't just mean to have a longer Shemona Esrei than everybody else. That doesn't make someone a tzaddik. What defines a Moshe Rabbeinu as a tzaddik is a person that Hashem will choose who's selfless, who's self-sacrificing, who doesn't look at himself as an individual, who looks at himself as part of a collective whole. That's the person that Hashem chooses. That's the person that defines himself in our history as a tzaddik. We all know Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 students, right? 24,000 students. Students of Rabbi Akiva. And not one of them, not one vart, not one idea of Torah was transmitted by them to us. We have nothing from them. All of halacha, all of shas, all of medrash, everything we have is from the 5 students that Rabbi Akiva taught after he lost the 24,000. But now one vart comes from any of those 24,000. Why? Because the Gemara says about them, on their level, they didn't honor each other with as much respect as they deserved. Which means they looked at themselves on some level as individuals. They weren't as selfless as a tzaddik should be. And a tzaddik who's not selfless isn't part of the tradition. That's it. You're not going to be part of that tradition. Those tzaddikim that we carry with us as, the collective memories of who our leaders are people that are selfless, and that's it. That's it. Ramosha Feinstein, there's so many stories of this. Ramosha Feinstein is known for his brilliance. His brilliance. You were able to go to Ramosha Feinstein, in 1 second, a person could ask a question about kashrus, a detailed, complicated question, and in another second, a person could ask a question about Gittin. Kol HaTorah Kula was on his fingertips, literally on his fingertips. So Ramosha Feinstein, as far as, being a Talmid Chacham, we all know he was a Talmid Chacham. But what about his selflessness? Listen to this story. This is an unbelievable one. Before Moshe Feinstein came to America, he was born and raised in Russia, right? He was actually a Rav in Russia for a long time before he came to the United States. He came to America a little bit before the war, in the beginning of the war, really. So while he was back in Russia, and he was a Rav, he was in his early 20s when he was a Rav in a certain village in Russia, and he was still single at the time. So he stayed. He like there was he had his own apartment and everything, but there was a certain woman that was set aside in the community that she would cook for him, that she would make his food. Okay, so he was there for a number of months as the Rav, and after a few months of being there, his sister came to visit him. Okay, so his sister came to visit him and saw. It's a cute story, but she looks at her Moshe and he says, Moshe, you put on a few pounds. You look a little heavier than the way I remember you. Obviously, the food that you're being given is probably good. Yeah. So he says, yeah, it's very good. So they sit down to a meal, and this woman that prepares food for Moshe prepares for now both Moshe and his sister, and the sister takes one bite of the food, and it's terrible. It's inedible. The food is mahamish terrible. She looks at Moshe. Moshe is just plowing through it, eating the entire plate, and he finishes the entire plate. So the woman that makes the food wasn't in the room, so she looks at him, Moshe, how are you eating this? This is mamish garbage. He's like, you're right, I can't stand this. That's why I'm eating it incredibly fast just to get it down. But if I don't finish it, she's going to feel very insulted. She's going to feel very insulted. She's going to feel like, my cooking's not good for the Rav. She's going to feel very insulted. The problem is, once I finish the plate, she thinks I'm still hungry. So she gives me a second plate. So I have to eat a few plates of this stuff, and that's why I'm putting on some weight. But I have no choice. That's Moshe Feinstein. You understand, Moshe Feinstein, besides being a Talmid Chacham, but there's a selflessness. To define what makes a person a tzaddik is someone who doesn't look at himself as an individual. That's what's truly great about a tzaddik. That's what's truly great about a tzaddik. There's another ma'aseh they say from another great Talmid Chacham. Before the war, even now there's a yeshiva called Kamenetz. Before the war, the yeshiva of Kamenetz was one of the most chashuv yeshivas in Europe, and the Rosh Yeshiva of the yeshiva of Kamenetz was Baruch Ber Leibovich. Baruch Ber. He wrote a sefer called Bircha Shmuel in the most elite yeshivas in the world. Guys could sit on a piece of Bircha Shmuel for a week, literally. I mean, Baruch Ber is considered the top of the top. So there's a ma'aseh they say with Baruch Ber that he was the Rosh Yeshiva of Kamenetz, as I said, and what happened was his daughter became engaged to one of the students, one of the talmidim in the yeshiva. Very nice. What happened was, they're engaged for a couple months, and the chassan is coming up in a couple weeks, and all of a sudden, the guy, just completely skips town. He completely skips town, moves away to another yeshiva, and doesn't even confront the kal, not confront the Baruch Ber. Sends a letter, you don't break up with someone if you're engaged, not even over the phone is good enough, right? He doesn't even do that. He sends a letter. He writes a letter back saying that for reasons he doesn't want to talk about, he wants to break up the engagement. So obviously that's very hurtful and very terrible. So okay, no, what are you going to do? Nothing to do. A couple years later, listen to this. A couple years later, this guy, this chassan, who broke up the engagement with Baruch Ber's daughter, he is now, he has smicha, whatever, and now he's looking for a job as a rav in a certain town. And this town heard that he learned under Baruch Ber, so they figure, if you want to become the rav, we want a letter from Baruch Ber saying that you're deserving of the position. So now the guy's like, what am I going to do now? I broke up with his daughter completely. I can't face him. So he writes another letter. So he writes a letter saying that he wants a letter of recommendation from Baruch Ber. So Baruch Ber takes the letter and he closes. He goes into the office, and Baruch Ber was a very intense thinking, that type of personality, very, very intense. You see pictures of him. He's a very, very intense person. So he sits down with his pen and paper, very, very intensely, like he's learning the hardest thing, and he goes over and he writes a letter of recommendation. Rips it up, writes it again a few times over, and then finally, when he has his final draft of his letter of recommendation, he's still not happy. So he calls in a few of his top students in the yeshiva, and the mashgiach, Reb Shlomo Heinemann, which was one of the Rosh Yeshivas of Torah Das, was also there. He calls them into his office, and he tells them the situation. He says, "Listen, I have to be honest. I'm scared. I want to write a recommendation that's as honest and as truthful as I can be. And this guy is deserving of the position. He's a Talmid Chacham. I wanted him for my daughter. He's a Talmid Chacham. He's deserving of his position. I want to be as honest, and I want to make sure that my personal negative feelings towards this guy doesn't at all in any way affect the letter that I'm writing. But I can't trust myself, because you never know about your own personal stuff. I don't trust myself. So I want you to read this over, and each one go to your separate rooms. I don't even just read it over to yourselves and tell me if you think it's good." And they all read it, and Rav Shlomo Heinemann used to say the story over, he said that the letter said like unbelievable praises. The guy's, a Baki and a Charif, he knows Shas, he knows Halacha, everything. He's a Balmidas, Yerushalayim, everything. It's like mamish an unbelievable letter. So they go back to Baruch Ber, it's mamish perfect. Mamish perfect. That's where Baruch Ber was. Someone who was so selfless. Someone who's so selfless, who was hurt by this person, and still remains to be hurt. The guy didn't apologize at all. And not only on top of him being hurt, the guy now is asking for a huge favor. And still, the one thing Baruch Ber is worried about is whether or not he's going to be as flowery as he can be. And to make sure that his personal baggage with this guy doesn't come in the way. That's a tzaddik. That's a tzaddik. Even according to halacha, one of the 613 mitzvahs is a mitzvah called v'halachta b'drachav, that we have to go in the ways of Hashem. We have to go in the ways of Hashem. The Gemara says, Mahu chanon, avata chanon. Just like Hashem shows compassion, you have to be compassionate. Just like Hashem shows mercy, you have to be merciful. Just like Hashem gives, buries the dead, so you have to bury the dead, and so on. We don't have time to go into the details of this, but even according to halacha, that mitzvah not only obligates us to do good things. There's a mitzvah upon every single Jew to work on himself to become a person who wants to do good things. If a person gives tzedakah, it's not enough to just give tzedakah. You have to become a person who wants to give tzedakah. It's not, if a person is born, God forbid, with the Yetzer Hara to steal, it's not enough just not to steal. A person has to work on himself to become someone who doesn't want to take from another person. That's part of our obligation. The more we work on this, the more we have the mindset of B'soich ami anoch yeshavs, I sit amongst my people. The more we do that, the more we act like that, the more Hashem is willing to become one with us. And the more Hashem is willing to become one with us, the more He'll judge us favorably, because He's judging Himself, so to speak. And just like we judge ourselves favorably, Hashem will judge us favorably as well. It's so important. It's so important. This is what defines a tzaddik. Once I'm thinking about stories, there's another Gevaldige story with Rav Kotler. Rav Kotler was also one of these people, a brain, once in 100 years, a brain like a Baron Kotler. Baron Kotler, Rosh Hashiva of Lakewood. So during the war, during the Holocaust, he was very, very much involved in Hatzalas Nefashos, in trying to save as many Jews as he can from Europe. Very much involved. So there's a story, they say, it actually involved a person from Queens in this neighborhood, actually. The story goes that Reb Aaron was told, you'll hear, Reb Aaron was, I don't know exactly who it was, Reb Aaron was told that, actually, your father, he knows this story well. Reb Aaron was told that there was a community in Italy, a community of Jews, that they're at risk of being deported to death camps. And there's no, but somehow he was able to figure out that there is a way to save them. Most communities were, utterly lost. But there was a way, he understood that there was a way to save this community. So what is he going to do? What is he going to do? So he's told that there's a mob boss, like Louis Costello. That was the guy's name. Costello? Costello. A mob boss, one of the guy from the mafia. A mafia. What are they called?
He was a godfather.
Godfather. Yeah, fine. I sound like an old man. What are they called? Anyway, so he hears that this Louis Costello is very much a person of means. You know what I'm saying? He could take care of things. So they tell him, Reb Aaron, you don't want to get involved with people like this. You know what I'm saying? If you cross them the wrong way, that's literally pekuach nefesh. It's literally your life is in danger once you even. It's like you have to. You don't want this guy to even know you exist. So he goes over to him, and he says, Reb Aaron goes with a person from Queens, a Rav over here.
Little Italy.
Yeah, he goes to Little Italy with this guy, and they go in, and Reb Aaron didn't speak English. Reb Aaron spoke Yiddish, so he speaks in Yiddish, and this guy from Queens is translating for him, and he says, and Reb Aaron starts to cry, and he says, there's Jews in Italy that lives are in danger, and it's mamish, it'll be such a mitzvah if you were to help them. And the guy says to the translator, he says, shut up, I like the way this old man speaks. So I just let him speak, and then afterwards he'll tell me what he's saying. So he listens to Reb Aaron talk, and Reb Aaron's crying. So the guy says, I have no problem helping you, not at all, but I want something in return. You got, it doesn't come, you're asking me for a favor, I need something back. So Reb Aaron's thinking, this is genius. What am I going to offer? Money? He has all the money in the world. What am I going to offer this guy? So he says, Reb Aaron says to him, if you help, I'll give you a bracha. I promise that you'll die on your own bed from old age. You're not going to be killed. Which for this guy, he's in a situation where, his life is in danger every day from other people. So he gives him such a bracha. And the guy says, fine, 100%. And he goes on, and the story goes that he saves this Jewish community. Years later, this literally happened. what are they? It was a car, right? Pulls up by Lakewood. A nice long, stretch limo pulls up by Lakewood. 20 years later, whatever it might be, and Rav Aaron Kudler has already passed away, but his son, Rav Shneur Kudler, was the Rosh Hashiva there. And this guy, this mob boss's son, steps out of the limo, and he goes up to the yeshiva and he asks, "I want to speak to Aaron Kudler." So they tell him Aaron Kudler is not here anymore. His son is in charge. Okay, let me speak to his son. So he goes to Rav Shneur Kudler and he says to him, says in the whole story, he says, "I want to just mention to you that again, your father blessed my father that he should die of old age on his own bed, and it just happened. Last week he just passed away out of old age, and he was not harmed, and he just died naturally. So I saw that your brachas worked, that your blessings worked. So I want a blessing for myself that I should also die on my bed." So Rav Shneur says, "Listen, I'm not my father. My father can do what I can. I bless you with such a thing. I don't know if it'll work. So we have to, it'll take a couple of years more to find out if this, if Rav Shneur's bracha was able to work as much as Rav Aaron's. But you see such a thing. That's the selflessness of a tzaddik. A tzaddik is someone who doesn't care about what's going to happen to him. That's what defines a tzaddik. That's what we need to do. That's what we need to understand. It goes more than that. We all know that what we're aspiring to, the Jewish people. We have to be considered a holy people. We have to be kedoshim, like the pasuk says that kedoshim to you. You have to be holy people. What does it mean to be holy? What does it mean? Ever thought about it? We have to say holy, where I'm kaddish, a holy people. We should be. What does it mean holiness? What does it mean holiness? So Rav Shimon Shkop said. Rav Shimon Shkop is again another. Usually it's Chassidus. Now playing the other side of the field. Okay, so Rav Shimon Shkop was a great Rosh Hashiva, again in pre-war Europe. What Rav Shimon wrote? Rav Shimon writes, he wrote a sefer. He writes this in his introduction to the sefer. He says, what the definition of holiness is? Definition of holiness means selflessness. That's what holiness means. That's what holiness means. It means not just to be separate from physical life. It means to be dedicated to everybody else, dedicated to the klal, dedicated to your friend, dedicated to the tzibur. That's the definition of holiness. That's the definition of holiness. When we aspire to be holy, to be God-fearing, all that stuff, the definition of holiness is to care for the other person. It's to care for your neighbor. That's the definition of holiness. This is something that, again, the more we hold on to this, and the more we remember how the key to success when it comes to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, the key is to become a person who accepts upon himself to help others. It's as simple as that. The more we accept upon ourselves to help others, the more we become selfless people, the more Hashem will look on us compassionately. Because when Hashem might judge an individual in a negative way, but Hashem will never judge a group of people in a negative way. A collective whole is always complete. The more a person becomes part of that collective whole and becomes selfless, the more Hashem will take care of him. So let me end off with another story. It popped into my head, another one. Again, usually it's Chassidus, but now we'll go the other side. We've all heard, Reb Chaim Soloveitchik. The Soloveitchiks is an illustrious family. So the sort of like the first, most famous Soloveitchik was Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, the Beis Halevi. Beis Halevi was one of the Rosh Yeshivas in Volozhin, Yeshiva Volozhin. He was the father of Chaim Soloveitchik. He started the whole dynasty. So the story goes like this: the Beis Halevi was once in Beis Medrash learning with his son Reb Chaim, and they're learning for a couple hours, and all of a sudden they're alone in the Beis Medrash, and all of a sudden in walks the butcher. The butcher of the town, throws the doors open and immediately comes running into the Rav, into the Beis Halevi, and starts yelling at him and cursing him and really going to town on him. So Reb Chaim doesn't know what's going on, and from the whole cursing and this guy's mom losing his mind on the Beis Halevi, he realizes that what happened was that the previous day this butcher had a court case with a friend of his by the Beis Halevi, and the Beis Halevi paskined that the butcher was wrong, and the butcher owed the other guy, let's say $100, whatever it might be. And this butcher was losing his mind, how you're terrible, you're a liar, you're a thief, you're a ganef, a rasha. His mom is going to town on the Beis Halevi. So the whole time, the guy's really cursing the Beis Halevi, and the Beis Halevi the whole time, Reb Chaim said, was sitting there with his hands folded and listening intently to what the butcher was saying, and was whispering to himself the entire time, I'm moichel you, I'm moichel you, I'm moichel you. And that's what he's saying the entire time as this butcher's mom is giving it to him over his head. And eventually Reb Chaim the guy got physical with the Beis Halevi. Reb Chaim had to literally hold him out and kick him out of the place. But the whole time, as Reb Chaim was schlepping him out of the Beis Medrash, the Beis Halevi was following him and saying, I'm moichel you, I'm moichel you, I'm moichel you. Okay. So the next day, what happened was this butcher, besides being a butcher, he also owned obviously a lot of cattle. So the next day he was herding his cows and his steers, whatever it might be, into the barn, whatever it is, and one of the cows got loose and trampled him to death. That's what happened the next day. So the Beis Levi heard about this, and he immediately broke into tears. He said, "Oh my!" He was afraid that the reason why this guy was killed was because he cursed him and he disrespected the Beis Levi. And the Beis Levi felt so terrible that Jewish blood was spilled because of him, and he could not be consoled. Rechaim kept on telling him that the entire time you were saying "I'm Leichel," the whole time. Beis Levi said, "Yeah, I said that, but maybe I didn't really feel it. I didn't really mean it. Maybe there was part of me that was still upset about it." And he was mamish zebrachan. So what did Beis Levi do? So Beis Levi was not able to be consoled. So he accepted upon himself that he would say Kaddish for him the entire year. Not only would he say Kaddish from the entire year, he would learn Mishnayos from the entire year. Not only would he say Kaddish and learn Mishnayos from the entire year, every yahrzeit he would say Kaddish. Not only that, every yahrzeit he would fast for the guy. Not only that, every yahrzeit he would give a special drasha to the whole community in his chus. Not only that, all the chumras and halacha that he accepted upon himself to keep on his parents' yahrzeit, he accepted also to keep on this guy's yahrzeit. That's a tzaddik. That's a tzaddik. That's someone who understands that the way to return to connect to Hashem, the way to become one with Hashem is to become one with others. That's it. It's as simple as that. I mean, it's not simple to do, but it's something that we all have to begin to start. Because the more, and that's really what's, listen, we want Mashiach to come, we want everything to take place. As we all know, Rav Kook said, right, the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of what? Sinas Chinam, and the way the Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt is through what? Ahavas Chinam. Selfless love, and that's what we have to do. That's what we have to hold on to. So again, if we take this to heart and we learn from the stories of our tzaddikim, and we realize that the way to become a true holy person is to become selfless and to become dedicated to helping others, then there's no question we'll be definitely judged favorably as we judge ourselves, and we'll be zayich this coming year to be a skal tzaddik meher v'yameinu amen.
Okay, so first of all, we're not having any more night seder until after.